Welcome to the Spike Camp podcast. Spike Camp is a free online community for hunters that support conservation. It's a great place to share stories and your experience with other hunters. As a member of Spike Camp, you get access to all of our hunting live streams, discussion channels, contests, hunter resources, and events that we host. Membership to Spike Camp is free. Our only ask is that you are a member of a hunting or conservation group before you register. Head over to spikecamp.com to join us. This episode of the Spike Camp podcast is brought to you in part by Precision Optics. Omer and his team are the ones to trust when it comes to mountain hunting gear, guns, and optics. Precision Optics is a major supporter of conservation, and we are proud to partner with them. Head over to precisionoptics.net and tell them that Spike Camp sent you.
Welcome to the International Hunting Series on Spike Camp. We have a very special guest, and I say a very special guest because our second guest unfortunately couldn't make it tonight. So joining us tonight, we have Nolan Wannop, who is a Wild Sheep Society of BC. What are you? You're Monarch Platinum? Is that what
I
it
am
is now?
Monarch Platinum. Yep.
Man, I got some rungs in the ladder to climb. I'm a Monarch member, so I got to get to that
Perfect.
Platinum.
Well, we even
Platinum
introduced a new level. A couple of new levels, actually.
Yeah, our buddy Don Lynham picked up a pretty high level at the show there.
He
That's
did?
pretty insane.
That is very.
Congratulations. So anyway, we wanted to get you on tonight to talk about South Africa. So we were supposed to have Riaan Jacobs from Bosveld Jacobs Safaris on, but he's had some technical issues and cannot make the show tonight. So Nolan is kind enough to kind of wear both hats tonight and answer questions and kind of take up the slack there. So for those that don't know, Bosveld Jacobs Safaris donates hunts every year. I think sometimes it's more than one, right? No, they do one or two.
It is actually. So Riaan and his outfitting, they donate on average of 2 to the southern, which is the one that we usually, and 2 to the northern. And he's been kind enough to donate some other hunts to some other wildlife conservation efforts that I deal with. Ducks Unlimited, for example, he's donated some stuff to Vancouver Island, Ducks Unlimited. So he's and he doesn't just do it for the BC chapter. He does it for approximately 7 or 8 foundation, and Alberta is another one he donates heavily to. But all of the Wild Sheep Foundation chapters, he donates heavily to as well. And he is a life member of quite a few of them.
Yeah, that's an incredible gesture from that group to do that many free hunts. I know a lot of outfitters, all over the world will donate a hunt or two a year, but these guys are consistently there when we need them to be. And you think about the money that is generated from those hunts, and it's pretty staggering if we were to try to put a calculator to it and total it up. But
well, I can tell you, like NBC alone, it's over $250,000. Through his hunt donations and through his conservation efforts for the northern and the southern. It's very significant over 5 years that he's generated in revenue across the board, and he's going strong. He's going to go bigger next year for the Penticton show, more booths, and then he's bringing in some other international conservation efforts that he works with, including a couple of international artists that he's going to do some booth sharing with. So that's his plan. We'll see if the society can accommodate what his requirements or wants are. But yeah, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, and Blake knows, and my wife who's on the recording tonight watching knows, but I was lucky enough to win a bid a few years back on Bosveld hunt, and I'm off in about 3 weeks to go on a hunt with Riaan and his crew. And actually it's kind of a funny story, and I'm going to quickly just give everybody the history. So going back in time 3-4 years ago, I didn't know who Nolan was at all. And this was when COVID times were on, and we had the virtual show happening. The Kamloops show was virtual. Yep. And I was traveling with my wife, and I was bidding on some auction items, and we had talked about going on a trip to South Africa, and the plan was we were going to plan it together. And well, let's just say I got caught up in the moment, and I ended up winning the hunt. And yeah, it was a little tense after when that happened at the dinner that I was at with my wife, because she wasn't expecting me to do it. But at the end of the day, she came around. She's a great lady, and she understands. So she's all in now, and we're off to South Africa here in a few weeks. But it was a couple weeks later, I got a call from this guy. It's like, hey, Chuck, this is Nolan from Wild Sheep Society, BC. Give me a call. So I phoned up Nolan, and turns out that the guy that I was bidding against on the auction was Nolan's father-in-law. And I don't know, were you the one that was actually bidding for him?
No, because that was the buffalo year when I bought the buffalo hunt that they had donated. So we were all sitting in the living room drinking,
Yeah,
and my
that's how it
wife set a
starts.
budget, and I got drunk, and we doubled that budget. So it's what happened.
Oh, that's funny. But anyway, yeah. So you phoned me and said, "Hey, we're gonna go on this hunt. My father-in-law is gonna go. We're gonna take the whole family, and if you guys come along, we'll book out that would book out the whole lodge." And that was for the next year. And obviously, we did not go. We just had a lot of family items and weddings and stuff that we had to stick around for. But yeah, so that's how I ended up connecting with Nolan. And yeah, it's been interesting going through the process of planning this whole hunt. And you did a podcast with Kyle on Talk of Sheep about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, I guess, when you got back, and
Yeah.
you unpacked that hunt. And I would encourage everybody who's on tonight to take some time and listen to that, because there's some pretty cool stories on there as well. And you unpacked it in a great way, and it was awesome. So I'm going to freestyle it a little bit here and kind of get into, there's going to be some questions that I was going to flip over to Riaan, and I'm going to actually flip them to you. So when you decided to go on this trip, you made the commitment to take the family on this trip. Did you have any idea what you were getting into on this trip, or were you essentially kind of flying blind?
Well, you know what is the greatest thing about the internet is there's always an answer. There's always an opinion, right or wrong. You can source what you want out of it, right? And platforms such as what you're doing, platforms like the WSSBC, the Talk of Sheep, there's so many different platforms out there now that actually educate people from hunters. And I'm not talking from conservationists, but from hunters. There's a different mindset from a conservationist than there is a hunter. Like, we all go to South Africa to hunt. Conservation is a great side effect of it. It is definitely, in my opinion, the reason why I booked with Riaan and his outfit. But as a whole, it was a challenge to find an outfitter that aligned with what my goals were when it came to hunting. Funny, and if we got a few minutes, I'll just kind of get into the whys and the whens and the hows. I was pre-COVID is when we originally started looking at South Africa, and I was at my mom's house for Christmas time in 19, that's dating myself, in like 2018. And I was talking to the wife, and we had decided, okay, we're going to book Africa. And we had come to the conclusion there was two outfitters that we were looking at, because their conservation mindset aligned with what my mindset is, right? Like, I'm a Platinum Monarch member in the Wild Sheep Society, BC. I'm a life member of the WSS, the Wild Sheep Foundation. I've never killed a sheep. Not because I haven't had the opportunity, because the right one hasn't presented itself. I'm not a buy a tag and kill one every year. I'm a buy a tag, support the conservation efforts, and when the right one comes along, I'll squeeze the trigger, drop the hammer, and it's done. But Bosveld Jacobs, they are such a compassionate company, and they give so much of themselves, not only to the people that they work with, but to the people of South Africa. Now, South Africa is a third world country. It's very backwards in mindset compared to what you and I think. The old adage, excuse my, black is black and white is white, and there's no gray in the world. And in South Africa, black is black and white is white, and that's how they treat the people there. And it's something that takes a lot of getting used to, coming from a mindset of equality for people, equality for women, color is irrelevant, race is irrelevant, sexual orientation is irrelevant, to a country that is very relevant. That was the biggest hurdle that I had to get my brain to wrap around. I walked into the kitchen. If I want something, I'm going to go get it. And I walked into the kitchen, and there was 4 ladies in that kitchen, and there was 1 gentleman, and they were all Black people. And the women turned around and wouldn't look at me. They wouldn't talk to me. And that made me feel really uncomfortable because I'm no better than them, right? Like my mindset is that I'm just a guy here that's purchasing something, and you're part of the experience. You're part of the culture. You're part of what we're doing. But it's something you have to get used to. They're treated very, very, very well compared to a lot of other people that are in that country. You hear a lot of the violence against farmers and so on and so forth. And I talked to my tracker, for example, Dumpy was a great conversationalist. And he explained to me that this was the old white mentality against the people of color in South Africa, that they wouldn't pay them, they would treat them badly. You know, it still happens in today's day and age, where if you walk them out to the wagon wheel and tie them and you take a whip to them, like that shit happens there. And it sucks to say it, but that's the reality of a third world country run by a small proportion of people. So the mindset of Bosveld and what they do is every single animal that's harvested, they have the families of all of the people, the staff, the members are all on site or close to on site, and they're fed. They don't eat with you because they don't want it. They like to keep their culture the way their culture is. And even when they go out and they feed themselves, they don't all conglomerate around their own little one campfire, but they all go and they make their independent little campfires, and there's 30 of them out there, and they're all cooking their own food by themselves. They eat their food, and then they get together after the fact, and then they communicate, and they spend some time together. But what they did was all of the protein that we didn't consume in camp and we didn't utilize in camp, we then went to the local, for lack of a better word, Costco or Superstore, and we purchased a vast amount of staples. And then we went around to a variety of different homes and houses, and we distributed the food and the protein that we purchased and the protein that we harvested that wasn't being utilized. It was in, just ground up. It was steaks, it was roast, it was sausages. They processed it, and they didn't charge anybody for any of this. And of course it came at a cost. It came at a personal cost to myself, but we knew where that was going. And we know for a fact that if international hunting and the laws and the rules and regulations that are trying to be implemented by the world is put on these small countries that rely upon it, it's going to have such a dramatic impact on what actually happens in those countries that it's going to set them back so far. So that was the big reason why we chose Bosveld Jacobs, was that their conservation. And now actually, to be honest, is that Riaan wasn't donating anything to WSSBC until I had reached out and I'd booked a hunt. And then I started to communicate with Riaan about the conservation efforts. And he was the first, he approached me about making donations with Kyle, and I set him up with Kyle, and we were able to facilitate some donations. And it was a onesie twosie thing to start out with. And now he can't get enough. His attitude is I'll give you as many hunts as you want. For wherever we can use it, wherever you need it. And his donations are not buy me and sell it and I make a profit and you get a percentage. His donations in most instances are 100% donations. So of course, granted, a donation such as what you did, he wants to have, he's a businessman in as much. So you give something, you get something. So, when you go, his expectation or his want or his hope is that you'll pick a couple of items above and beyond, and you'll go and you'll harvest some animals and he'll make some money, right? Like that's how these guys do business. But for conservation side, for efforts, these guys are unbelievable. And they were able to help me across the board bring in my family to South Africa. And that was the number one thing is my family's my world. Everything I do in my life is for my family. And safety was the number one thing. And there wasn't a time or a place when we were in South Africa that I felt that I couldn't control the situation, and they didn't put us in a situation that I felt like, okay, I'm going to grab that handgun off that guy's hip and I'm just going to feel a little bit more comfortable to protect my family. Right. So they go above and beyond to keep you safe.
Right. Yeah. And actually that, before we get too deep into that, I'd like to put some context there, because I know the story, but most of the listeners and people that are going to watch this or listen to it, maybe you could summarize the trip for us a little bit. Like, how long did you go? How many people? What was the total number of animals? I know that number, it's staggering, but maybe you could sort of give us a little context on it, Nolan, if you would.
Yeah, so there's myself, my wife, and my 3 kids, and then my father-in-law and mother-in-law came. My wife's mom and dad, they came, and then we brought my wife's aunt and one of her friends, and so there was 9 of us total that had gone. It was 21 days basically from leave Vancouver to fly into Vancouver, and we spent, there was a couple of days on travel. It's 2 days to get there. We flew Vancouver to Paris, no, Vancouver to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Paris, Paris to Jayburg. On the way back, Jayburg to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Vancouver. So my wife hates to fly. She doesn't mind flying. She hates taking off and she hates landing. So ultimately her attitude is that, let's get in the air. So the least amount of stops or layovers as possible. So that's how we book our flights, is based on, is it direct? Well, we can't go to Johannesburg direct. So we did 10 days of hunting, boots on the ground at Bosveld, and then we did 4 days in Kruger. And Kruger was fantastic. It gave a totally different perspective of what goes on in South Africa. You learn a lot. You learn about conservation, things that people say, oh my God, like how could you shoot an elephant, for example? You learn about the wise giraffe. That's another one. How could you shoot a giraffe? Well, giraffe, they're majestic when you live in Canada and you've never seen one in the wild, and they're a pest and they're vermin when you're in South Africa and you're hunting, because they screw you up on every animal you're hunting. They got a perspective 20 feet above the trees, right? So eventually giraffes are like, okay, well, just go shoot that rat over there because it's in the way, right?
Yeah, I've heard people call them the walking tree stand before.
Yeah, that's exactly what they could be called.
Wow. So, I mean, that's like it's an expedition, really, when you got that many people. I mean, this is something that Teddy Roosevelt probably would write a book about.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine the logistics on this, but maybe you could maybe walk us through. This was a question I had for Riaan, but you had lots of time there. So maybe just walk us through sort of a day in the life on a hunt in South Africa, like from sun up to sundown. How does it look?
Okay, yeah, it's pretty standard across the board. So you're going to get up about an hour pre-sunup. Now the one thing about South Africa is that when the sun comes up, it's dark, and 5 minutes later it's bright. And everybody says that, but I would put my drone up in the trees and I would, I'm trying to watch my language here. No BS. Okay. You in a 5-minute video clip, you could watch the sun come up, and the sunrises and the sunsets in South Africa are unbelievable. You get up in the morning about an hour before sunup. You have breakfast around, and breakfast is always fantastic food. I'm a foodie. You can tell if you've seen all of me. And the food there is phenomenal, and the food that you consume, the sausages, that's sausage. It's kudu sausage or sable sausage or impala sausage, like wildebeest. It's what you harvest is what you're fed for proteins, and the food is fantastic. You get up in the morning, you have your coffee, you have your breakfast, the sun's up, then you load up trackers, dogs, and load up all your hydration. So there's always beer, there's always cider, there's always water, there's always pop. And a lot of it in your vehicle, and it's different hunting. You drive around in a vehicle, and a lot of people say you drive around with a shopping list, and in some ways, yes, this is the case, but in other ways, would you rather know the price of an animal that you're looking at harvesting before you squeeze the trigger and shoot it or wound it, or would you rather just go out and get a bill at the end of the hunt and say, oh my God, how could I get to this place? So every animal in South Africa is owned by the property owner. So, and everything in South Africa is fenced. There is no fences on land outside of Kruger that is owned for hunting purposes. And the reason for this is that these animals are livestock, and the properties are vast. So this is something that they always say, oh, you're hunting behind a fence. So let's put this in perspective. Is that a 10,000 hectare ranch is 22,000 acres, which is basically 6 by 15 miles. So a white-tailed deer lives in 2 square miles its entire life outside of the rut when it roams. These animals can spend their entire lives in these fences and never see a fence. And I did see that. I know that, and I can tell you because I've seen it. Kudu will jump the fence. A rhino is going to go through the fence. A giraffe is going to walk over the fence. They don't have elephants behind the fence. Impalas go under, blessbuck go under, warthogs go under. So the purpose of the fence is not to keep animals in. The purpose of the fence is to keep the poachers and people out. That's the purpose of the fence. These animals are purchased by the outfitters, by the landowners, and they have a monetary vested interest in these animals. They spend time, they spend effort, they spend money to generate a quality animal, to grow a quality animal that will bring hunters not only in, but bring a hunter back. And there's nothing better, or there's no better compliment to a professional hunter than for somebody to book a return hunt because they enjoyed their time so much. There's nothing canned about hunting in South Africa. There's nothing easy about hunting in South Africa. Point in fact, we arrived, and if I can tell you the whole story, but the night that we arrived there with my family, we arrived early enough that we went to Riaan's hotel, the Val Water Hotel. We had lunch, and then we went out to their property, and we got settled into the property. We went to the shooting range and shot. My 10-year-old daughter, well, at the time, 9-year-old daughter shot. My 12-year-old boy, my 14-year-old daughter, my wife, myself, we all shot just to show that, okay, we can handle the firearm. We're not, you watch the person when they squeeze the trigger to see how they react to the gun. Are they anticipating a kick? Are they waiting for a recoil? Are they flinching? Are they this? You want to know what somebody's going to do as a shot calmly, but you also want to know how somebody's going to react in a pressure situation, especially if you're hunting a dangerous game animal. So I grabbed my bow after the fact, and out hunting we go. And my young daughter was out. They came across a buffalo that we called One Eye, and it was a buffalo that we later learned only had one eye. It had lost an eye in a hunt, and she had taken a photo of that, and she sent me the picture, and she said, "Daddy, I found your buffalo." And believe it or not, that was the buffalo I hunted with my bow for days and days and days. And again, we were under 4,500 hectares, so just shy of 10,000 acres. And that buffalo, I had a couple of shot opportunities because we were the first hunters on that property for the year, so they weren't that skittish. But by day 3, when I had put stock number 10 or 11 to get a shot on it, that buffalo disappeared for 7 days. And we eventually got him, but it wasn't with a bow. It was with a rifle that we eventually got him. And I had that buffalo at 20 yards quite a few times, and just no shot was presented, no nothing. So there's nothing easy about hunting behind a fence. So anybody that thinks it's easy and it's simple, you want to make it difficult, put a bow in your hand, go after a lion, go after something that's going to, a female lion. You hunt a female lion, you push it. You never seen it. 9 out of 10 people, they harvest their female lion as it's charging you to take you out because they're tired of it. So do that with a bow and see if that's actually, an easy hunt, right? Warthog with a bow, not easy. Any of the tiny 10 with a bow, not easy unless you're just lucky. So, but exactly. So sorry, I just digressed there. But as you go out in the morning, you do your hunt, and the heat of the day, usually about 1 o'clock, then you find a place to go and have lunch. And usually they'll stoke up a fire. They'll cook some smokies or some hot dogs or something like that with animals with protein that somebody previous to you hunted and took out. Or if it's, let's say you're on a 2-week hunt, let's say, day 1, you shot an impala, you're going to have impala sausages or burgers or something your second week. They want to try to get a couple of days of age on it, and they process it, right? But all your biltong, all your sausages, all your smoky, all of that stuff is stuff that has been harvested on site. Then you go to sleep for a couple hours, and no matter what, everybody says, "Oh, I'm not going to sleep." It's freaking hot, and you sit in that hammock, and you're in the breeze, and you're in the shade, and you're looking at the lions that have been scratching up the trees, and you fall asleep. And then you get woke up, and then you go and you do your evening hunt. Dangerous game isn't hunted an hour and a half. That's basically cutoff time. They'll stop hunting dangerous game before sundown, simply because if you make a bad shot, they don't want to have to leave it out. Because no matter what you say, leopards, lions, any of the cheetahs, the cats, those animals, fences mean nothing. They go over them, they go under them, they go through them. So if you've got an animal down, let's say you dump a buffalo and it's $18,000 and you don't get it recovered that night, and a cat gets on it and it chews everything up on that animal, the only thing you're getting is a Euro amount out of it, and you're still paying. So they want to ensure that that's the conservation, not the conservation side, that's the hunter side of it. That's they don't want to put their PHs and their guides in danger. They don't want to put their dogs in danger. Because if you made a bad shot or a questionable shot, or it's getting close to dark, the dogs get put out. And that just is a total different scenario there as well, right? Everything changes when the dogs are after that animal. So then you come back, clean up, have dinner, sit around the briar, shoot the shit, talk about your stories, and have some fun and have some drinks, and then get up the next day and do it again.
It's like a busy day. I like the hammock part in the middle of the day. Sounds pretty awesome too. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it is definitely it's good.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people comment, people that have never been to South Africa or Africa in general to hunt, about the fences. And I think there needs to be a clear distinction made between high fence hunting and African fence hunting. Like, someone told me, someone framed it this way. They said, it's more of a boundary than it is a fence. And like you just articulated, you got animals of all shapes, sizes, athletic ability, and the cats and stuff. And you're just not going to stop them. So I did my wife and I did a hunt in New Zealand a few years back at a very high end outfitter, and his property was, I think he was 20,000 acres of high fence. And we were hunting, the stag were in there, and for a lot of it, he just left the gates open because they just had so many that they were just overrun with them. So it became a problem because there's no predators there. But once you're inside, I mean, you're still hunting. You still have to get in range, and you still have to do your stalking and that. And no, it's not stone sheep hunting, and it's not calling in a bull moose. But let's face it, it's fun. Right? It's fun. You're going to see, like, how many animals a day were you guys seeing? Like, I can't even imagine.
1,500 to 2,000 a day. And, honestly, there's days where you hunt, and it doesn't matter where you hunt. Like, I hunt the Kootenays for elk, and I go up to Bull River, and, I hunt a 10 square kilometer area in the bulls. And I see the same bull every couple of days when I'm up there. It's a 5-point with a drop, and the drop time makes it a 5-point. And you get to know these animals, and animals in Africa are the same way. You see an animal, and you don't really see them all over the property. You see animals that are in the habitat that they're predetermined to like. Impala that want some of the more open fields, and warthogs that are just everywhere, right? Blessed buck. You see the herd animals. Golden wildebeest don't mesh with the blue wildebeest. And the black wildebeest. It's really weird. But in terms of vastness of animals, there were animals all over the place. And it wasn't that they had an overabundance of animals. And that's the nice thing, is that it was very well managed. Think of a cattle farm. If you have too many cattle on the landscape, they're going to overgraze, and you start to lose the root. You lose the ability to actually grow that grass back. And it's managed like a ranch. They have quotas, they have numbers. If there's too many animals, they go out. Like the property owner of the property that we hunted, Jacques, which you didn't meet in Penticton, he wasn't there, but you'll meet him when you go there. His brother was the owner of the property that we hunted, and he's a helicopter pilot. And he owns, I think, 5 or 6 rotaries that he flies around. And he goes out every morning when he goes to leave, and he does a flyover his property, and he checks all of his properties. And his co-pilot, they have their dart guns. And if they see an animal that they feel is sick, they will dart them. And I don't recall the med that they use. It's the one that they came out that says the end all be all, that Rogan was using it for COVID. So, but they're very, very, very serious about the conservation efforts, and they're very serious about their animals. Even an impala that's $350 for you and I to go and harvest, the guy's flying over it with a helicopter, and he will make sure that animal is healthy. They do tick dips. They ensure that they have lots of water. They do irrigation. They've got drilled wells. They've got dug ponds so that they can ensure that through the dry period that they can water these animals, and they can still water the landscape to grow feed, right? So it's funny because the world's perception of, as you say, high fence hunting and or hunting behind a fence. Ignorance is bliss on the fact that if you haven't been there, then you don't have a firsthand opinion. And if you don't have firsthand knowledge, then the opinion is simply ignorant. Because if you haven't lived it, seen it, or done it, you shouldn't have an opinion on it because you don't know what you're talking about. And that's my take on it, right? Like it's a very controversial thing. I've hunted behind a fence. I've got some very good friends. Steve Rand's a fantastic friend of mine. He owns a high fence outfit in Saskatchewan, and he was Jim Shockey's cameraman for Shockey Secrets. The guy is one of the best guides in North America, and it's a dollar and cents thing. He's down to a hunt ranch in Saskatchewan.
It's a business. Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what it is in Africa as well. It's a business. You're a businessman. I'm a businessman. Blake, you're a businessman. You guys, you all have a platform. You have some rhyme or reason for what you're doing, and their platform is what they're doing, the hunting, and they bring joy. It's a dream. It's I'm lucky in my business. And my kids are lucky. I grew up single mom. I had no power, no running water. We shut in a bucket in the middle of the night and dumped it out in the morning. That was life for me. And to go from that to where I'm at today and to be able to offer my kids something better, but to be able to do the good that we can do with it as well. If we didn't go to Africa, we couldn't have supported Riaan and his family the way that we did. And during COVID, which is a big one, is that for the 2 years that they didn't have a single person coming in there generating revenue for their business, they still went out, they culled the animals, they processed the animals, and they still fed those people. And that says something. That says something about the type of people that they are. And those are the type of people that if I'm going to do this and I'm going to spend money on an international, those are the people that I'm going to support. They supported their people. And it's not that they look at a South African and see a color. They look at South Africans and they see a people. And that was probably the most refreshing take on that really struck home with me. Their guides, their PHs, their support staff are treated very, very, very well, and they're compensated extremely well. And for that first world mentality to be taken to a third world country where they don't have to, they choose to do it and they do it, that is definitely refreshing. That definitely says something about their character and the type of outfit that they run.
Yeah, no, well said. So you mentioned the firearms a little bit. You touched on it when you got there. First thing you did was go to the range. You guys rented firearms, right?
We did, yes.
So, in my case, my wife and I are traveling after the fact for, another couple weeks. And it pains me to not bring a rifle on the trip, but this is my, apart from New Zealand, when I did the New Zealand trip, I rented a rifle, and it turned out to be a brand new rifle that I actually mounted the scope on for them when I was there, bore sighted it. So I got to choose. But I'm, I have African dream rifles sitting in my safe because I'm a gun guy. But I've chosen to rent, and I think Greg Rensmag might have told me, but they're suppressed, right? They're shooting their rifles have suppressors on them, or you can shoot with a suppressor if you want.
Some do, yes. So Jacques. So yes, there's two. You're going to hunt with either Jacques or Riaan.
Okay.
Jacques has a Seiko in a 30-06 that's suppressed, and almost every animal you hunt with Jacques, that'll be taken with that firearm. And he does have a 375 in a Seiko. And Riaan has a 308 that's not suppressed, and a 375 as well that's not suppressed. So I know that Greg hunted with Riaan in most instances, but the firearm that I hunted with Riaan with my wife, just because Riaan is known to be the archery guy. And when we went, that was my hunt was the Cape Buffalo with a bow. So that was who was assigned to us as a PH. And there's in my world and in my mind, that was the best PH that I could have had for the animals that I was going after. And he's a young guy, he's in shape. I'm when at that time was in significantly better shape than I am now. And we went on our kudu hunt. We spent the entire day hiking the mountains, and I loved it. And whereas Jacques he was with my father-in-law and mother-in-law, and they went out, they drove around, they seen an animal, they would get out, so if you drive past an animal that you want to harvest, you don't shoot animals out of the vehicle. There's like this, just, it's not fish in a barrel scenario. If you do come across an animal that you want to hunt, and you do happen to come across it in a vehicle, they're going to drive by it, or the animal will spook off. You'll get out and you'll go after it. The trackers will put you on it, or you'll drive past it, depending on the type of animal. Like a Cape buffalo, for example, they don't run for nothing. But they will move, and they're not going to stop. And if you're in front of them, they're just going to go through you. So depending on what actually happens when you see the animal will determine how you go after it. But, for example, the Cape buffalo that I did harvest with my bow, it was day 5, and we had hunted one-eye for the 4 days. Day 3, we pushed him hard. We lost him in the morning of day 3. We didn't see him in the evening of day 3, and we didn't see him at all on day 4. And I had 2 things that were my wants for a buffalo, and we were driving down the road, and we just drove up, and sitting on the right-hand side of the road, there's these 2 buffalo, and the one just checked every box that I wanted. And Riaan asked me basically, well, do you want to keep looking for one-eye, or do you want to go after that one? And I said, you know what? Because it wasn't about me going to Africa to hunt an animal with my wife and shoot that one buffalo. I wanted to hunt with my kids, and my son had already shot some animals. My daughter had already shot some animals, and I wasn't there to do it. And that chewed at me, like that ate at me. So it was almost to the point where it's like, okay, I'm either going to pause hunting the buffalo, or I'm just going to pick up a rifle and I'm going to shoot it. So I thought, you know what, let's go after it. So we drove for 10 minutes. We knew where that animal was. We drove for 10 minutes, and then we got out and we started to walk back, and we picked up the spoor and the tracker. The trackers there are freaking unbelievable. Like, I mean, unbelievable. And, an hour and a half later, I'm 15 yards from that animal at full draw. Twice, had to let down a couple of times. And eventually we got the shot, took the shot. The animal stepped and moved. Anyway, we put the arrow into it. It would have been a kill shot, but ethically we followed it up. I shot it twice with a 375 after the fact. Just because of when I released the arrow, the animal stepped left, and the arrow went in behind the rib and down, and I could still see the fletch. And I knew I got lung, but I knew that there wouldn't be a blood trail. So because I was above it, it was down a little bit, and the arrow went in from a higher angle into a lower angle to penetrate. So I knew that it's not going to fill up, and going in through behind the rib, it's going to go, it's got to go through, if I hit, the intestine, whichever. So I knew at that stage, when it turned, it ran about 50 yards when I hit it with the arrow. So it was about, I don't know, 65 or 70 yards, and it turned and it faced us. And you could see the look on the tracker's face that he's like handing me the gun, giving me the bow. So I did that and just threw up the rifle on the sticks, and he just put his head down, and I squeezed off a shot, and then he turned. But as soon as they put their head down, they're coming at you. That's the thing about a buffalo. Yeah. So the smart thing, the ethical thing, the safe thing to do, because my wife was there with just a camera. She's got it all on video and whatnot. So conservation is big, safety is big, but these guys are well trained. They know what they're doing, and they're very good at what they do. And
yeah, and I was just going to say, that if you've got a dangerous game animal like that wounded, I think, well, you're always under the responsibility of the professional hunter or the guide or whatever the case may be. And when that guy reaches over and hands you a 375 and says, "Give me the bow," you're probably not screwing around with that. You're gonna
not at all. Right? Not at all. But like yourself, I am a gun guy. I've got a I'm probably one of Omer's better customers. And if Omer's got one, I probably got it too. And I missed having my guns. I will say that, if you have a Night Force and for a scope, and if you have a gunwork for a firearm or a Fierce or even a Seiko 85, there's just something to be said that me as a gun owner, you as a gun owner, you take pride in your firearms, you take pride in your optics, and you get used to them. I can shoot my 7 Psalm in a gunwork significantly better than I can shoot their 308 in a $50, $60 scope that they got topped on it, right? So if I were to go again, would I rent a rifle? If I'm going to travel after the fact, which when I go my next trip, I'm going to go do some diving with the great whites. So I'm not going to travel with a firearm through South Africa. So that's my only, damn, I wish I could have, if you can put it into an expression, right, would be to take my guns. So, but
do you know if, is it possible to ship your gun and then have it shipped back? I guess you could ship anything, but is there anybody that specializes in that? That just sounds scary to me, but it's also got a convenience factor to it.
You could do that, but I was going to ship those guys a bottle of tequila every month so they could join the Tequila of the Month Club. And they said they'll never get it because it'll never reach them, because everything and anything in the mail is just going to disappear. So personally, I would never put a gun of any value in the mail. Now, if you were going with somebody else and you transferred that firearm into their name before you went and they brought it back for you, and then they transferred it back to you, that would be the one way to do it, where, for example, if Blake was going with you or something like that, then he could bring your firearm back for you. Yeah, exactly. But as for mail, I wouldn't even trust it with FedEx or any of the couriers that are working over there.
I think somebody, I haven't researched this because I'm like you, I'm going to go on the first trip, I'm going to go rent and just feel it out and, trust them, trust their equipment, sight it in, test it, all that stuff. But somebody told me, someone who's from South Africa told me that I think there's secure lockup companies at like Joburg airport where you can actually go in and you can secure your rifle in a really safe environment. But then, you got to come back, transit through to pick it up and whatnot. So when I'm over, I'm definitely going to look into that, because according to my wife, we're already going back. She said this tonight at dinner. It's just not a if, it's a when. We're going to go back. So she's already going on her second trip. And we haven't even done the first one. So when we go back, hopefully I can bring a weapon, because I have a few lined up for that. One of the things I wanted to ask, I mean, you had such a large group, you had 9 people, and you brought some teammates along to help manage the family and stuff. But obviously you didn't throw 6 or 7 people in a hunting truck every morning. So, not everybody was hunting all day, every day, I don't think. How did you manage the family and the activities? What other types of things could people do other than the good stuff, the hunting? So,
okay, a very, very valid point. So my wife and I hunted with Riaan with the bow for the buffalo, because again, dangerous game. They didn't want any hanger-oners, for lack of a better word. My mother-in-law, and so 3 people in a truck, that's the max. That's, long story short, 3 people in a truck. Being that there was 2 non-hunters that were with us and my 3 kids, we divvied the kids up. If they were out on a tour, for lack of a better word, and the non-hunters went out on a safari every single day, they went out and they did exactly what we did with a firearm. They did it with a camera, and they loved it. They had so much fun checking out animals. They would go into places that were more photo driven as opposed to hunter driven. They would go to town and they would go shopping. They would go and they would distribute food to the needy, go to the orphanages and distribute. And like I said, we were there for 4 weeks, boots on the ground. And 4 of those days was Kruger. There is travel time, that the Limpopo Valley is about 4.5 hours north of Johannesburg. By the time you get through the airport, get through customs, get your gear, get loaded up, it's a couple of hours. And depending on what time you land will determine where you go and what you do, right? If you land early enough in the morning, you're going to get picked up that day, shuttled out to Limpopo, and you'll go forward. If not, then Riaan, they have a guest house in Johannesburg. They'll set you up. They'll have a shuttle take you to the guest house, and then they pick you up in the morning and take you up there and go. But so it was always me and Amanda for the first 5 days there where we were hunting the buffalo, and my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and they would take out one of the kids. So the deal was that whoever was with the mother and father-in-law, that they could hunt an animal if Ron didn't want to harvest the animal. So they were allotted, each kid was allotted for lack of a better word, not a budget, but that they were allotted some animals that if they really wanted to harvest, they could harvest it. And my aunt, or my wife's aunt, she was brought along as a babysitter. Like, it's just call a spade a spade. is we brought her on to help with the kids, because when you travel internationally with 3 kids, granted they're a little bit older. When we first we first booked this trip, it was pre-COVID. We had our bags at the front door when Trump shut down the Seattle airport, and we were leaving the next day. So that was, and it was funny because we changed when COVID first came out. We were supposed to fly to Hong Kong, and that was the route was Vancouver to Hong Kong to Johannesburg. And the wife was talking to me about this COVID, this whatever that's going on, and she didn't feel comfortable flying into Hong Kong. So let's revise our plans and fly a different route. And so we changed our flights and we went to Paris. And then we said, okay, well, let's spend a day in Paris. We'll go to Disney World with the kids, do the Eiffel Tower, all that crap, and then go from there. But that was what we were the first time. So we had a lot of time to figure out what we wanted to do and what we wanted to budget and what we wanted to spend. So our kids were much younger when we first originally planned the trip. And we didn't want to take a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old or 11-year-old without some assistance. So we wanted an adult or a couple. So, the plan, me and Amanda took the young one. The in-laws took the older one, and we brought Amanda's aunt to babysit the middle one. So that's why we had extended that offer to her, because we brought her, we paid for all of her expenses and everything and brought her along. So when we did eventually go and the kids were older, then it didn't seem reasonable to withdraw that offer. So we continued that offer. So that's why she ended up coming anyways, to make a long story short, was for that reason. So we ended up with the 2 ladies and 2 of the kids, and they went out with Riaan's brother, Hank, and they probably had more fun than all of us did. Because if they wanted to go swimming in a pool, they didn't have to be quiet. They weren't stalking an animal. They weren't there. They were out with no expectation outside of if I told Hank, look, if Logan was the first one to shoot an animal and he was with Hank, actually, he shot a blessed buck on day 1 or the morning of day 2 that we were there. And Logan had no idea that he was allowed to harvest an animal, and he was just in his glory. So it gave everybody what they wanted and what they expected out of it, with no expectations, I guess, if that makes sense. Everybody wants to go back. Everybody's willing to go back. They're dying to go back, for lack of a better word. And everybody really enjoyed themselves.
Right on. No, it's a great idea to have, sort of a second wave of adults to help, even with like you said, with the older kids. It's just company for them, if nothing else, right?
Yeah.
One of the things you touched on, which I have a list, but you mentioned you kind of went through trying to stack out a budget, and I think that's a great idea, but I'm just curious how that actually works in the long run, because the opportunity is everywhere, right? So did you have in your mind, I mean, you came back with a lot of animals as a group, but
we did.
Did you start out at least with a list, and did you try to stick to that at all?
I will say that we did. My iPad's dying. I have to plug this thing in. So just give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
Yep, no worries.
We did have a budget. We had a pretty solid budget in mind. And we had our list. So as we had said earlier there, when you were talking about the trip that you had gone after, was that for my 50th birthday, because we knew when we were going to go, because the trip had already been canceled once, my wife, Riaan, had donated a buffalo. So my wife had bought me the buffalo as a trip. I'm sorry, I'm just making sure that this thing actually turns on to charge. So my animal was paid for, which was the buffalo. I guess if you want to say that there was an animal that was paid for, the numbers can be, what's the best way to put it? They can sneak up on you very fast. So you do have to be careful on what you want. But budgets are just that, they're a guideline, right? So so my attitude is that I'd already paid for a buffalo. I'm not going to hunt another buffalo. And then when I harvested the buffalo, my heart, because I'd spent so much time hunting that one particular buffalo, and it sounds really stupid, and it does, because the buffalo that I shot with my bow was 30, just shy of 38 inches, and anybody in the world should be happy with a buffalo that's 38 inches in size. But for some reason, it didn't tickle that itch of this isn't one eye, and that's what stuck in my mind, is that it's not one eye. So ultimately, long story short, is I ended up going after this other buffalo, and it may not have been the best thing to do, but my wife, I was out and I was kudu hunting, and she comes up to me and she says, "Oh, I shot one eye today." And I said to her, "Well, what do you mean you shot one eye?" And she says, "Oh, I shot him with my camera."
Yeah.
So she brought this up, and this was on day 9. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this plug in to work. I don't want to die here.
No, go ahead. If you want
So-
to move around your room or whatever to plug in, go right ahead.
Sorry, I got it on the wall here. So the buffalo, I'm not going to give you figures because that's just going to make me sound like an asshole. But I went from a budget of about 10 grand, and I could have easily
More than
mortgaged
that.
my house at that
Yeah.
stage of the game, right? It's I made a deal. I got Riaan pretty drunk, and I convinced him to sell me the second Cape Buffalo for a Canadian dollar value instead of US dollar value. So that made
There
it a
you
little
go.
bit easier to swallow for a number there. So if you're really budget conscious, stick to the smaller animals, stick to the warthogs, the impalas, the blessed bucks, stick to stuff like that. If you're not concerned about a budget, then shoot it's pretty easy to know what is going to be more expensive, because if it takes your breath away, it's not going to be cheap. A sable is not going to be a cheap animal. A roan is not going to be a cheap animal. A Cape Buffalo is not cheap. And your perception of dollar. And I mean, I'm in a business that $50,000 isn't a lot of money. And I'm Blake, you're in the same boat. That the reality is when you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a week on things, the perception of dollar value really gets kind of skewed. So when you're in the heat of the moment, a buffalo for 10 grand isn't a lot of money when you pay $50,000 a week for fuel. But the reality is it's a lot of money, right? Like let's just call a spade a spade. It's a lot of money. So you just have to, that's what I was getting to is that it adds up very, very fast, and then there's things that you don't think about when it's all said and done. And the biggest one that I always kept in the back of my mind was the tip compensation when it's all said and done to the people. My PH, I brought a drone. I bought one of the DJI Mavic 3s down, and my PH that I was with just fell in love with that drone. They were doing videography, and he had done a lot of drone work, and they had a Mavic, not one of like a Mavic 1 or a Mavic Pro. And every time I flew that drone, he'd be out there wanting to fly it and play with it and see with it. So I know that he was in the midst of building a house at the time. So I talked to Riaan, and I basically said, look, this is my thoughts, is that I might give this to Riaan as a tip. What are your thoughts? Now that's a drastic end. I mean, that thing with the Flymore kit was just shy of $5 grand when it's all said and done, but that man earned that tip. That's what we gave him. And then we screwed up a scope of his. Now, granted, it wasn't an expensive scope, but we still screwed up a scope. So, he got a little bit of cash, but everybody else that's there, no matter what it was and what they did, they made it about you. And everybody was well aware that it's not that you were doted on like your royalty, but if you needed something, it was there. And it's little things you don't think about. Your laundry, like they every single day, they did your laundry, and it was done with eucalyptus. So we were there in March, end of March, like I was there this time last year hunting. Like right now, exactly a year ago today, I had a bow in my hand and I was chasing one eye. And that's exactly where I was 365 and a quarter days from right now. So every single little thing. So tick season is big. We came back with tick bite fever. We came back, and that's a long story, but we ended up, they wash your clothes with eucalyptus. They tell you what to do to make sure you don't get it. You don't need to take stuff for, you're not going to get malaria from mosquito bites. It's not in that area. You don't need to take the meds because you're going to get sick from them. There's just lots of little things that you don't have to do or need to do, that you can think about little things and say to yourself, hey, you know what, we might be better off doing something this way or doing something that way. But they're always conscious of taking care of you and making sure that you have what you want, when you want, where you want it, so that everybody is in. It's about you. I'm a tequila guy. They've never had a tequila guy in camp. They had tequila there that it granted Omeka. Let's call that tequila, but it's like calling Captain Morgan rum. But it's tequila, right? And a bad tequila is better than a good whiskey, in my opinion. So, but they went above and beyond to try to make sure that they had what you wanted and or needed, or what your little niche things were, if there's specific things. So they made sure that it was there. And the same thing with the camp staff. If they made a comment about something that your kids like, this kind of a chocolate, that chocolate showed up the next day. Where it came from, I have no idea. But if your kid likes caramel chocolate bars, then there's caramel chocolate bars for your kid to eat. Doritos chips, that type of stuff like that. They really went above and beyond to ensure that they looked after you, but they didn't make it seem like it was a big deal. They made them had 5 people out there scouring to do it. And there was no grandioso to it. It was just, it's sitting in a bowl on the counter. That's what you had made a comment about, something that you really enjoy, you really like. So
then did you, how did you handle that? So you tipped your PH a fairly, big tip, I should say, which is normal, I think, in whether you're fishing or hunting or whatever. But what kind of was there a percentage used, or what was the formula for the staff tip? Was it a group tip?
So we sat down and we had a discussion with Riaan about it, and he explained it to us basically that said, okay, the easiest way to do this is this. Your cooks, your laundry people, the trackers, the game skinners, that type of stuff. Like, everybody is assigned what is basically a tip based on a for lack of a better word, a rate, if you want to call it that. And so for the trip, what was recommended for a 10-day trip as a tip for the trackers would be $500. So $50 a day for a tracker for a tip. And I hunted 2 dangerous game animals, and these guys are phenomenal. So we took what Riaan suggested as a tip, and then we either paid more. Like we paid more in every instance, actually, is what we had done for a tip, because going there with the size of the group that we went with, and the fact that I had 3 kids that were there, I felt that it was warranted, right? My kids are slobs, like every 10, 12, 14-year-old kid is. Like, they're slobs, embarrassing so much so. And when you're on holidays, so was I, right? I mean, but I come in and all my clothes are folded and my dirty socks are cleaned, and, dirty underwear is done, and you go from there. And, probably the biggest tip that I can tell anybody right now is that no matter what you think you've packed too much. You need, honest to God, they will take your clothes and they will wash it every single day. You need 2 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of shorts, and 2 shirts. That's all you need for clothing. And a couple of scree gaiters and a pair of shoes that are comfortable. And that is it. You should be able to take all of your clothes for a safari in a walk-on bag. And that's that. We had 10 people. We had 20 bags. They had to bring a cart to bring our shit with us. It was ridiculous. And crap that you would never use, and overpacking is probably the most common thing that's going to happen. So
that's a good tip. That's a really good tip. I know when we did our trip to New Zealand, we had the same thing. They just had a basket. You put your clothes in the basket at night, and you get up in the morning, and that basket's sitting there, folded clothes.
Yep.
Great tip.
Exactly.
Back to the tipping. You had $500 for the trackers. Was it the trackers?
Yeah,
or
we
the
gave
skinners?
1,000, but yeah, $500 is what they had recommended. We gave them more because, again, like I said, we did some dangerous games, and if you're looking, we're sitting in a hammock, we're having something to eat, and those guys are out beating the bush trying to find spoor for an animal we're trying to hunt, because they can tell the difference between this one buffalo track than the other 500 that are on that property, and they want you to be successful, right? Yeah. Very
so
much
then you've got let's break the staff down. That really would be, so you tip those guys. You got cooks, you've got housekeepers,
cleaners, you got laundry,
like
and housekeepers.
Yeah.
Is what you
so
have.
This
so
is
there's usually
selfish. I'm just gonna say, here's a selfish question, because I'm going there in 3 weeks. So it's my wife and I. We're gonna be there for 8 days. I'm probably gonna shoot 6 animals. It's kind of the idea. 6 on this trip, 6 on the next. I guess I'm the only special needs out of the equation, because my wife is very self-sufficient. what would you suggest a tip would be then? Is it based off the total amount spent? Is that kind of what you do?
No. So I would look at it this way. I would look at $100 a day for your tracker and your pH.
Okay.
$30 a day for your cook. So you're at 130, and $30 a day for the cleaners and the laundry. So you're looking at about $200 a day.
200
is what you
200 plus,
yeah.
like on the minimum. Yeah. Great
Yep.
advice, Noel. Thank you. One of the big questions I had is related to the taxidermy. So if I recall, I know Greg did, but you got your taxidermy work all done there, right? Because they have a really good taxidermist. I'll let you kind of speak to that.
I did. We have everything done by Bullseye, and they are a fantastic taxidermist. Now, we still don't have our trophies back as of yet, but we are waiting for them. They are mounted. We're waiting for box up to be done.
Okay. Obviously, the price of the hunt is a price list, and you went through that. Did you decide kind of you must have right out of the gate that you were going to use their taxi then? Is that how you did it?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of really good buddies that are taxidermists. Craig Stoley is a great friend. And not that he's not a fantastic taxidermy, but the reality is that if something went sideways with a cape, at least I know that if it's in South Africa, they can fix it and they can secure a new cape for me. So maybe that's a perk to having the pH that works well with a taxidermist company there. I mean, I'm not going to say that everybody that hunts with Riaan utilizes them. Greg did. I know a bunch of the other people that I'd utilized did. Is it cheaper? I don't know. I think I've got 17 animals coming back taxidermied. Of those 17, I think 5 are full-bodied, and my taxidermy bill was about 13,000 US. Now, I did get all of my back skins for everything. So, I got 2 Cape Buffalo. We pedestal mounted those, shoulder pedestal those, put those on pedestals. I did end up, I didn't shoot a buff or an elephant, but I did get some replica elephant tusks done simply because where are you going to find those in Canada? Nowhere. And B, for $450 US, I got 200-pound elephant replica tusks coming. So just to set the stage of, my living room, which is going to be my trophy room, for those things, that it's going to bode well with what I'm doing and what my plans are, right? But I shot an Inyala that's exceptional in size, and that thing is a full body that's going, and you can't shoot an Inyala and not taxidermy at full body, in my opinion, right? Like the nicest thing about an Inyala is the orange on the legs. It's unbelievable, the coloring of those things. Some of the tiny stuff, the common diker, the bushbuck, the clip springer, those things just all, you might as well full body them, right? There's things,
exactly.
It was exceptionally wide. Where I had planned to put it, I can't. So my wife shot a really nice sable that's nice and flares out really nicely on the back end. So you want to show them off as much as you possibly can, right? So my daughter, she really wanted she's a horsewoman, and she's an exceptional rider, but she really wanted a zebra. She wanted to shoot a zebra. And then we put the stock on. She was on the sticks, and she's 9, and she just couldn't squeeze it. She couldn't squeeze the trigger. She couldn't drop the hammer. She wasn't ready to do it. And you can't fault her for it. She did everything right. She had everything there, barring, a camera system where I could have helped her and said, okay, squeeze it together type thing. She did everything. And then, and she knew she couldn't do it. So I harvested it for her. And as far as I'm concerned, that's her animal. That it wasn't on my list to harvest, but she wanted it. And then she tells me that she wants it because she wants the full body mount the stupid thing and put a saddle on it and ride it in her bedroom. But if we didn't full mount the zebra, it's mounted on the wall, and that's where it's going to go. But it's memories like that I don't care the cost. If it costs you $5,000 or $50,000 or $100,000, I'll say that my trip, taxidermy, shipping, flights, everything is over $100K. But you can definitely do that trip. You can buy a package from Riaan. Flights are stupid cheap right now to South Africa. If you stick to reasonable animals and you don't, do something stupid like I did and let your kid shoot what they want. He'd have shot me bankrupt, that kid. And but they all grew. My son grew, my daughters grew, my wife grew, I grew. It's memories are priceless. I'm not going to take an animal to the grave, but I could be laying on my dying bed and I'll remember that trip with my family as our first international trip, because it was, and that'll make me smile. It's to me, it's priceless, no matter what the cost associated to it. That is priceless when it's all said and done. For taxidermy, I think 17 animals, and like I said, there's 4 or 5 full bodies. There's some big animals, and they're done nicely. I was about 12 to 15,000 into the taxidermy with all the back skins when it's all said and done, and that's US dollars. And now there's crating and shipping that I'm waiting for that bill. I'm not going to fly it. There's just no way in hell I've waited a year now for them. We'll put them on a boat. We'll ship them here. That'll probably be about a third of the cost to put them on a plane, because I just can't justify $15,000 to get them a month earlier when I've waited a year already, right? So it's all about perspective. If you got money to burn, like I don't, then you got to be frugal about it. No matter what, everybody, if you spend it like you don't need it, then I think there's something wrong. Like I've watched guys in Reno spend money like it's unbelievable. And these guys are in the Forbes 500 and they're flying in on their private jets. And I mean, they're top of the Forbes 500 guys that go to Reno, some of these guys. And you cannot, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you can't play in the billionaires pool that these guys are playing in. And you got to be frugal. You always have to be conscious of what you're doing. And when you're harvesting an animal and you're driving around in a car, you cover a lot of ground fast. You see a lot of different animals. You've got to remember that you squeeze the trigger. If you draw blood, if you find one speck of blood, you're paying for that animal, whether you find it or not. You pay for it. I paid for it too. My son, he made a fantastic shot. They found it 3 days later, but the birds that were on it, and there wasn't much left of the hide in the animal. The meat wasn't salvageable, but we'll get the euro out of it. And I still think that my wife had made a shot at a clip springer, and it was probably 30 yards away. And it sounds stupid to say, but a 30-yard shot's a difficult shot on a gun that's 0 to 200 at an animal that's 14 inches tall through the trees and whatnot. But we found some red on a rock, and I don't know that I would have called it blood, but we found red on a rock. So we paid for a clip springer that's running around South Africa right now. That I'll go back and I'll harvest, and hey, there's a scar on the knee. That's my clip springer.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. And I think just the last thing on the taxidermy, I mean, that sounds like a pretty nice, it sounds like a pretty reasonable bill for one. And then secondly, I was chatting with, I think I was Ray Wayne's actually at the show. Ray's done some mounts for me, a couple, and he made a very good point. He said, honestly, if you're gonna do the big trip in any of some of these big international hunting trips, and you harvest an animal there, you're probably better off using a local taxidermist that sees these animals and works with them every day, right? And like you said, another great point there, just to back up, if the cape slips or something goes wrong with it, then at least you've got an option, a lot easier option to get it replaced. So the quality of the taxidermy work, probably more often than not, is going to be maybe a little more accurate. No slight against our taxidermists, but some of these guys just never see that stuff, right? So it's going to be, it's a challenge for them. They love it, but I mean, it's obviously another way to look at it.
Well, they're going to get an impala, and they're going to find a deer form that fits, and they're going to put it on a deer form, right? Or an antelope form, or something.
Or whatever.
In most instances, they make the forms in South Africa. They don't buy them. They're handmade forms that they mount everything on still. So they are artists. They do a fantastic job. And there's a master taxidermist that everything is checked. And if it's not 100%, it doesn't go out. So I've seen every animal that they've harvested for me. They sent me photos of every single one, and I'm excited to actually put my hands on them. They are phenomenal.
Oh, I bet. You got you got a big room ready to go for all this stuff?
The kids shot animals, they go in their bedroom. That's my thoughts. The Cape Buffalo go on either side of the TV. Yeah. It took about 3 months to actually kind of lay out the house and say, okay, this is going to go here, this is going to go there, and figure out exactly what we're going to put where and go from there. So we've put a lot of thought into how we're going to do it, and we'll get them back just probably in time to put them back in the crate and put the house up for sale. So
Oh, there you go.
happen.
You just build a trophy room, a big shop or something. That's what you need
That's
to
the
do.
plan. Yeah, they'll go in my office and then I'm on.
So time is clicking on here. So and you've been so gracious with your time tonight. I'm gonna hold you on for a couple more questions.
No worries.
So looking back after this big adventure, this huge adventure that you took your family on, now you're planning the second trip back.
Yep.
What are you going to change up this time around? What would you do different looking in
Not take
retrospect of the
my
trip?
notes.
There you go.
I wouldn't do anything different. To be straight up honest with you, I would if the first time you go, I'm an all in or nothing kind of guy. That's you see that kind of in what I do with the Sheep Society and with my business and everything else. And there's no slow to my roll. So if there's something that I want, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it to the nth degree. And I'm going to do it with the mindset that I just turned 51. There's a lot of hunting that I want to do. I don't know how much time I got left to do it. So when I go, if there's 10 animals that I want, I'm going to take all 10 if it's possible. And then if an opportunity arises where I can go back and do a second trip, then I'll go after the ones that, okay, maybe they weren't there. You know, there's certain things, you know, when I went on my first trip, a water buck was not anywhere near my list. And spending some time in Kruger and seeing some of those animals, now a water buck is like, damn it, I should have shot a water buck. You know, I never got a chance in an eland. I have the bush buck, I have the kudu. What else do I have for the spiral slam? I got the bush buck, the kudu. There's 4 on the spiral. I can't remember what they are, which is stupid as hell because I have 3 of the 4. The Inyala. So I need the Impala. I think it's the Inyala. Don't quote me on that one for that, but I want to complete my spiral slam. I know I need the Impala for the spiral slam. One thing that I did want to hunt that I never got a chance to hunt anywhere was springbuck. There was no springbuck where I was at. They're more of a Cape animal in the southeast or southwest. Maybe slow it down a little bit. Maybe, you know, walk a little slower, a little easier on the landscape and just kind of take it in as opposed to just go. Couple more days in Kruger as opposed to, you know, in the back of a vehicle hunting. I mean, like the day that we were leaving, I woke my PH up and I'm like, I didn't shoot an Impala. Like, let's go. It's time to go. You know, I hunted, I threw a sandwich down my my mouth as we're packing up to head off to Kruger. And they're kind of like, well, we need to go or we're not going to get the gate cut off at Kruger. Right. So we pulled into Kruger 15 minutes and then we had to check bows and check handguns and check rifles and a whole bunch of stuff that we had to check because you can't bring that into Kruger, obviously. Right.
Yeah.
So we barely, because when you go to Kruger, we stayed in Kruger for the times that we were there, which was fantastic, but it was pretty cool. But you have gate time. So if you're not inside of the locked gates at these times, then you're not getting in. So I don't know what they expect you to do because you're not allowed to sleep in your car in Kruger either, right? Unless you're with the camp people. But we did some night drives. We had a lot of fun. There's probably, you know, to answer your question, it really hits. I wasn't there when my son shot his first African animal. I wasn't there when my daughter shot her first African animal. And that really grinds me. Actually, that one is it was selfish of me to take that from myself to hunt an animal by myself. I should have maybe looked at how I hunted those animals, the dangerous game stuff differently. Maybe I should have spent that family time to be there with Logan when he shot his blessed buck and Chloe when she shot her Impala. You know, Brooklyn basically counted coup on her zebra. So like I said, to me, that was a harvest when it was all said and done. But that's the one that it grates me. I wasn't there when they took animals with a gun. It bugs me a lot that I wasn't. So to me, that's always.
You just have to take them on another trip to some other continent somewhere, Nolan, and you know,
for sure.
Again.
Yeah, I do agree.
So apart from the buffalo, what are your thoughts on the dangerous game side of things over there? And is that on your list?
Our trip back is we have lion on our trip back, and the wife wants to get she wants a big male lion, so that is her bucket list. And you know, it's I think that the way the world is going when it comes to some of these trophy animal hunting, like lion is a true trophy animal. You don't consume a lion.
Yeah.
So that one really, she wants the male lion, and I want a female lion with my bow, to be honest. So
Okay.
those are our 2 bucket list animals. And then it's, like I said, it's the impala, finish off the kudu slam. We want a brown hyena, a couple of the different predator animals that we're going for. The big 5, as the big 5, I think that there's more than enough of all of them on the landscape that, if you had 1,000 hunters a year take the big 5 as a whole, you're still gonna, their growth, the animal growth is going to continue on a positive side. It's managed so well. Like Kruger, to put it in perspective, when it comes to elephants, and elephants are controversial because there's not many elephants left. The reality is that Kruger can handle 30,000 elephants on the landscape, and there's 100,000 elephants in Kruger. So what's going to happen in 5 years from now when there's 140,000 or 130,000 or 120,000 elephants in Kruger? And when an elephant eats, they don't pull a limb off of a tree. An elephant knocks the fucking tree over, and they kill their food source. So an elephant is its own worst nightmare, and people are not doing any positivity by boycotting trophy hunting. They used to have a processing facility in Kruger where they would harvest elephants, and they would can the meat and they would give it out to the poor people. And believe it or not, there's more elephants in Kruger. They could feed their country for 25 years because there's so many that they're never going to get on top of it unless they get on top of it drastically. And unfortunately, drastically means you're going to go around in a helicopter with a 50 cal and you're going to take out herds and herds and herds. And you have to thin 70% of the animals that are walking around in Kruger right now for elephants to give the other 30% a chance to survive. Because if they don't, they're not going to. You can't transplant an elephant, and elephants are so destructive to farmers' crops in the northern side of Africa, Mozambique and Zimbabwe and those different places, that they're not there. That's where they may be having a problem. But there's black rhinos by the hundreds of thousands. There's white rhinos by the hundreds of thousands. They're all owned animals behind a fence. They may not be roaming around wild, but they're not extinct. They're living, breathing, doing just fine in South Africa because conservation is what they do. Conservation of animals is their livelihood of these farmers. And if they weren't conservation minded, they wouldn't have that revenue generator. And that machine is positively growing, and it's growing consistently to generate the revenue. And it's the country benefits from it. The taxes that are generated, the fallout from the hunting, like Riaan's not the only PH or the only outfitter out there that donates the food. He's just the one that the optics caught me the most because of the conservation side of things. Every single PH that's there, if there's food left, if there's proteins left, it gets given to the community, and they support those communities. Like when we would go to a different facility to hunt, we went to a couple of areas, like for example, where Greg went for his bushbuck or his bush pig. We had to drive through town, and we left to go there. We were going to go kudu hunting, and we left at 4 a.m. because it was about an hour drive. And there was women leaving the villages, and they would be leaving at 4 a.m. in the dark, and they would be coming back as we're coming back in the dark, and they're carrying buckets of water. They're carrying bundles of wood on their head. And they live in these tiny little tin houses that they just have one built onto another because it just think of the highest population densities you could think of in terms of housing, and this is how they're living. And like my hotel room is probably 500 square feet, and there would be 15 people sleeping in this room in Africa. That's the density. But they would have a satellite dish, and they would have TV, and they all have cell phones. So they've got some priorities that are up there. But
sure, yeah.
They don't have a stove, they don't have running water. They boil their water on wood that they collect, and they cook everything over an open fire. Like, it's back to the basics in those days. And the work ethic and work attitude of these people, it's something. Like my daughter, it changed my daughter. My oldest daughter, when she went out to divvy up the food and give to these people, she came back so humbled. Like, we don't need to eat all of this because there's people in the world that are hungry. And yes, there are. And yes, you're right. You don't need to take so much. You don't need to throw out food. You need to be conservation minded on what you're doing. And that's a good thing. And if she learns that from that trip, then it was definitely successful for her, you know,
For sure.
on that front.
Yeah, I think Africa in general is a continent that is spoken quite highly of when it comes to wildlife conservation, right?
Yes.
I think they're still learning some lessons on humanity and how people are treated. They've come a long ways, and I'm certainly no expert, but just from what I hear from people, and I travel a lot as well. But that one common theme is always there, that the African in general, the continental conservation model for Africa is a really good one, and we could take some pages out of their books. I think as far as they go as making decisions, and we don't want to get into political rant because Blake just pinged me here. We are zooming in on our time limit for the platform, but no, it's great. I really appreciate you coming on tonight, Nolan. I don't think we really needed Riaan, did we, Blake? We made it through without.
Yeah, we were totally fine.
Totally
he's eye candy.
sleepy out of it. Yeah, exactly. So
now I've got. I will just state that with regards to conservation is that the government has zero control over the animals in South Africa. The people that control the animals,
self-managed, right?
100%. If they have zero control over it, the only control they have is in Kruger. That's it, and that is where they have the poaching problems. That's where they have all of the problems, because the only place that somebody that's from South Africa can go to hunt is on government land. And if you shoot an animal on government land, then you can be put in jail for doing that. That's no matter where it is, whether it's in Kruger, whether it's inside of a town, and those animals don't last. If somebody sees something, there's 100 of them out there trying to kill it because it's protein to eat, right? So
did you guys run into any signs of poaching on Riaan's properties?
No, we didn't.
You see any?
Nope.
I think
they do open up.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say they do open up the facilities, like when the international hunters aren't there, they don't shut down to all of the locals. That is significantly reduced. I mean, an impala. So that's when they thin their herds, right? If they got they got impalas they want to harvest out, then they'll have a bunch of South Africans come in and they'll harvest 5 or 6 impala does for $20 or $30 an impala doe, right? Anything that type of stuff. So they thin them that way, and they try to spread it out to the local people and everybody. If you're an icon in a community, people have a tendency of looking out for you as a whole. And I find that they as a group treated the people very, very well. And I would think that the people, as much as they look out for them, they know what they do for the people. So they kind of look out for them as well, right? So I think that there's kind of lots of places where it's hands off. If you're going to go poach an animal, don't go there. They're good to everybody.
Right on. Perfect. Well, I'm gonna do my thanks to Riaan, even though he's not here. So I'm just gonna give him a plug. This has been probably the best infomercial that Bosveld Jacobs could have had, even though Riaan wasn't here. I'm just gonna tease him a little bit when I'm over there. But again, just a shout out to our members, Wild Sheep Society, and all the other conservation groups that would recognize the Bosveld Jacobs name. Think about all this when you're sitting at that table in next winter, when you're drinking with your buddies and the auction is there. You got 2 hands, raise one up, do what Nolan and his family did, bid some poor sucker like me up and get me to pay some money, open up the wallet. Just kidding. I would have paid anyway, but do your part. You think about what goes into these wonderful prizes that we see at these auctions. And, nothing is free in this world, no matter what. So the people that are donating these hunts and all these prizes and giveaways and things, they all come at a cost, but it all goes for one cause, and that's conservation. We can't forget that. And, so there's my plug for Riaan and Bosveld Jacobs Safari. As far as Nolan goes, on behalf of Wild Sheep Society of BC, Blake and I just want to thank you for everything you do. I mean, you're a very humble guy. You donate, you do a lot of things behind the scenes. I heard you quote, I'm probably on Kyle's podcast. I heard you say once that, time is your enemy. You don't have any time really to donate with your boots or your hands, but you choose to support conservation with your wallet. And I love that line. And you know what? You work your ass off. You have a great group of companies, and you contribute back. And on behalf of the Wild Sheep Society of BC, I just want to thank you for everything you do. And on behalf of Spike Camp, Nolan, thank you very, very much for coming on the show tonight. It's been a blast. We've learned a lot. Selfish as I am, I'm probably going to call you again in a week or so to get some last minute tips and tricks for my trip to South Africa. But thank you very much,
I got
buddy.
lots from you. I'll even send you some of that stuff you need. Because
Yeah,
you're going to have to take
exactly.
bullets to keep over there for me. So,
All right, there you go. Whatever you need, my friend.
you betcha.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
And for those that are tuning in tomorrow night, we have Mark Gashadi coming on, and Mark is, let's just call him I don't know. He's a very well-schooled international hunter. This guy is always on the move. He is. He's going to be a fun interview. I did not know how to frame or describe it, but I'm super excited to get him on there. And then on our third night, we've got Alex Sharif, he's a very, very talented writer, and he's got a lot to offer when it comes to international hunting, and especially in Central Asia and for some of the big sheep and ibex over there. So anyway, we'll see you guys tomorrow night.